Hello and welcome to Rusty Water Towers, the podcast in search of faith and hope in rural life and ministry. I'm your host, Jonathan Lemaster-Smith, or as folks call me, Dr. J. Each episode of the podcast, I talk with a guest about their experience in rural life and ministry as we search through their stories, examples, and images of creative faith and hope that I believe are latent in our rural communities. Our guest today is Crystal Imes, coordinator for NETworX Yadkin, as well as communications and training coordinator for NETworX USA. Our guest today is Crystal Imes, coordinator for NETworX Yadkin, as well as communications and training coordinator for NETworX USA. NETworX is a movement to measurably reduce poverty through education and love of neighbor as well as of self. But first, as always, we start each week off with a country music recommendation about rural life. This week, I'm diving into some indie country with Nashville artist Gabe. His albums are full of lyrics about small-town life, pain, hope, and connection. There's a song on his 2020 album, Honky Tonk Hell, that I often will find myself seeking out to listen to. It's called 30 Seconds at a Time, a simple 3-verse song that sings about 3 experiences in a small town. A group of young people, a local psychic, and, surprisingly, Jesus showing up in this little town. While each verse has a sadness about it, they all seem to offer something. I'll read the verse about the psychic. There's a park outside the city. A former psychic calls her home. She's half as old and twice as pretty as the doctor's misreport would have you know. She has a vision every morning. She sees the world through busted shards of glass. Selling last week's magazine outside the laundromat. Slowing down traffic at the light. 30 seconds at a time. This verse speaks about a psychic, but we know she's probably not a psychic. And, well, we don't, because this song seems to be more fanciful. I mean, Jesus shows up and is blessing mac and cheese while he's watching the score on the TV at the diner. But I think it's offering a peek into the colorful characters that live in our small rural towns and who we share our story with. This person, regardless of her psychic ability, is someone who is part of the community, someone who at least offers something to think about and to listen to. One thing the song doesn't do is talk about how sad her life is, whether she's dealing with homelessness, has mental health issues, or whatever that might be. They really see her as part of the town, their psychic. And who knows, maybe her visions offer something new for the community. Something to talk about in a town that might be passing by 30 seconds at a time. And just like always, I'll add this to our Rusty Water Towers playlist on Spotify. All right, now let's get on with our guest. Welcome, Crystal. What's been your experience of this song?
So I don't traditionally listen to country music, so this was this was new. So I especially wanted to listen very carefully to the verse about the psychic that you referenced. Mm-hmm. I do think I agree with your take that she's kind of a caricature for the characters that we see in rural places. But I also like the juxtaposition of her character and then the everyday Jesus that's in the diner in the next verse, because he says something about she has her visions through shards of broken glass. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to all of us kind of seeing the world through our own lens, broken, not broken, slightly cracked.
Yes.
And then I really love the next verse about Jesus blessing mac and cheese in the diner, because I really love the idea of us, especially in rural places, seeing Jesus in our neighbor, in the common person that's next to us.
Oh.
You know, you walk into your regular meat and 3 place, you know, and there's Jesus. But he's in every booth, at every table. He's sitting in the high chairs. He's waiting the tables. So I really love the idea of like this common Jesus also in this like juxtaposition of this woman seeing the world through her sort of broken lens.
I really like that. I appreciate you moving from Jesus being the biblical figure to Jesus being present in everyone. Also, for those of you who are listening and don't know what a meat and 3 is, it's a traditional rural diner, primarily in the South, but in other places as well, where you generally can go in and order a meat and 3 vegetables for a set price, or you may vary it up and order 4 vegetables or meat and 2, but there's usually, it rotates their meat and their vegetables every day, depending on the season, what they've got in stock, and those sort of things. I only say that because I've had to explain that before on a Facebook post.
I forget that the realities of real life are not reality for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And but I love a meet and three. That's mostly what my I pastor two churches now, and oftentimes people will go out, especially on Thursdays. We have what's called the lunch bunch, and there's three meet and three type places within the area. So there's always a menu. You can order always like a dry erase board menu with the list of the vegetables and meats, or you can order a hamburger, hot dog sort of thing. But it's just a common thing, and you have to teach people how to do it when you get there. And you have to point at the board and be like, today they're having fish and spaghetti and meatloaf, and you can get one of those plus any of those things down there, plus a dessert for this price. And you have to figure out how to do it and help them understand it. Thank you, Crystal, for sharing about this song and your experience with it. Now I want you to share a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? And what are you about?
Oh man, do we have time for all this? So I currently live in a tiny little part of Yadkin County called Hamptonville. So I live right in the middle of an Amish community, which is both peaceful and, of course, our idea of traffic is you get stuck behind a tractor or stuck behind an Amish cart.
Oh, yes.
But I'm also a city transplant. So I'm originally from Houston, Texas. And I grew up in Winston-Salem, which in comparison to Yadkinville is a big city. So I'm a bit of a transplant to rural life. And we moved to be closer to my husband's job. So I've been married to my husband, Matt, for almost 30 years. We got married very young. Doesn't work out for everybody. Worked out great for us. And we decided that we needed a really safe and quiet place to raise our 4 kids. So some of them are adults. One of them has grown and moved away, and the rest of them are slowly creeping in that direction.
Is it going by faster than you'd like it to?
Much, much faster. I think as soon as they start school, someone fast forwards time.
Oh, gosh. It feels like that even with kids that aren't mine. I'm just like, well, oh, now you're in med school. What happened?
Just yesterday, you were in kindergarten.
Right? Oh, goodness. Your story of moving to a rural area out from Winston is a common story across the board, and people who want to relocate to rural areas to sort of have a different pace of life, a quieter space, a space to really let you and your family explore who you are.
I also loved that if my kids ran outside in their underwear, there was no reason to be alarmed because our closest neighbor, was 4 miles away.
Yes, exactly. I live in a small town, so I can see my neighbor's house. But growing up, literally there were trees all around my house. So my parents were just like, be somewhat clothed and be outdoors. Yes. So what else what do you do for as your job? I know I talked about it a little bit, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more.
Sure. So my background is social work, but I have pretty much most of my professional career worked as a social worker in a faith context. So I work at a nonprofit called NETworX. NETworX it's spelled funny. It has a big capital X on the end, which is a Chi for Christ, because we're a faith-rooted initiative. We use a very Wesleyan lens to see poverty. So not just finances, but we believe that poverty is holistic. It is cognitive and social and physical. And we believe that in truth, if we really look at ourselves and our neighbors, that everyone has some form of poverty. And so we work really hard to build relationships. We believe those are the transformative piece that Jesus knew all along, and some of us have forgotten along the way.
Yes. I think that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I know NETworX is spreading. I know that several places in North Carolina, I believe, but is it nationwide now?
We do. We have 8 North Carolina communities that are NETworX communities, and we generally serve a county in a very in the way that rural people do. We don't see the city; we see the whole county.
Yes.
And we have 2 sites in California, so one in Elk Grove and one in Livermore.
Great. So I'm assuming as the program is successful and funding is available, you will spread as best you can.
We can. I think for me, it's most important for communities to see the value in what we do and come to us. I think we, at some point, maybe had a let's go and present this to communities. You really have to feel the connection in the community that is built at NETworX. It really becomes an extended family.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I think that really points to sort of that almost the biblical way of inviting people into it and having them experience what's happening and say, I would love for that to be in my space now. And I would be
Absolutely.
willing to help commit to doing all the things it takes to build that family. Because it's not just classes you go to, it's a whole community and family.
It is, absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to take a little break and then we'll come back and I'm going to have you share some stories or experiences you have of the hope in rural communities. Welcome back. Now, Crystal, as I ask all my guests, a story or experience or an example of how you see faith and hope working in rural life. And I bet you have some interesting stories and experiences to share with us.
Oh my goodness, we could be here all day, honestly.
Great, great. Just keep going.
So one of the things that I love to point out to people, and I know you know this about me, is that rural people are not a monolith, right? Like we have this idea about what rural people look like or who they are, but there is tremendous diversity in rural spaces. The folks that I work with here in Yadkin are primarily Latinx immigrants, and they tell us these amazing and heartbreaking stories all the time. So that's one of the gifts is that I get to, because I live in a rural place, I get to see the diversity that is all around me. And I love that it kind of pushes back against some of those stereotypes that we maybe mentally have about who lives in rural places.
Yes.
2020 was a really hard year for us. Not only were we dealing with the pandemic, my husband lost his job because of COVID. And then on Thanksgiving Day that year, he had a stroke.
Oh, wow.
And was out of work. And, he was in the hospital for quite some time. And so our family was really struggling, because, of course, our children had to see EMTs carry their father away.
Oh, yes.
So this was really difficult for us. And I think one of the greatest gifts of rural spaces is just the community that you build with other people. So we had people drop off food, and we had people drop off not only food, for that night, but they'd bring us freezer meals so that I could tend to my husband and not have to cook, which honestly is a gift. And we had people that donated, they would just take up a collection of money to help us with bills while he was recovering. And this was all sort of unsolicited just because we found out that you're struggling and we want to help.
Oh, wow.
And that's the kind of community that we have built in this space, even as, we're not from the county, we're transplants. And I think in Yadkin County, if you weren't born here, you're always a transplant, no matter how long you live here.
That's very, very true. Very true in a lot of spaces.
But we had people that we didn't know, praying for his recovery and just coming by and supporting us. And I don't know if we were in another setting, if that would have been the case. And it was just a real blessing to have all of these folks who, some of them we didn't even know, just be there to support us and love us through what was a really difficult time.
I mean, that's moving. That's sort of, you're not from there, and yet they embrace you and pull you in and do everything they can for you. And that's, I think, that reality of that rural space. Even though you're a transplant, you're one of them, even if you are a transplant. Because you came to the place and you wanted to be part of the community. Are you finding that in with this, as you spend more and more time with people in the community, do you feel the communities that you work with feel like they're part of the county as well?
Absolutely. And we kind of create our own community within the community. But one of the great things about the work that I do is really like that leadership development work that so often the circumstances of our lives don't allow us to see the gifts that we've been blessed with, because we're really just trying to make it from today to tomorrow and keep the lights on. And one of the really great gifts of the work that I do is that I get to see the gifts in other people that they may not even see for themselves. And say, I see this in you. How can we use this to your benefit, to the benefit of our community? And that has been such a blessing to me. It's that really brilliant, beautiful aha moment for folks when they say, oh, I care about this. I'm good at it. How can I use this?
Oh, that's beautiful. You kind of like just sort of dig out that hope and that potential that's in them and show them I have value and I have abilities and I'm going to do this.
That's right. I like to think that we just reconnect them to their belovedness.
Oh, that's very good. That sense of I am of value and I have gifts that I don't even know are there. And
Absolutely.
something somewhere has buried them, or I've covered them up with something like I shouldn't have this joy or shouldn't have this gift, and you just help them pull out and the belovedness and connect with the belovedness and the hope that's in the community they're in.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, are there anything else you'd like to share with us? I'm here for you to hear for people to hear your stories.
Oh man, so many stories, so many amazing, um, and almost every story I have is about a community coming in to support someone else. Like a few years ago, we had a participant who she lost her husband in a
Mm,
tragic car accident, and though my participants aren't overly wealthy, they got together. They actually took our church bus to go and sit with her while she was grieving. And it's this amazing example of being with people. We have as the church, especially, we're really good at doing for people.
mm,
We'll help you pay your bills or we'll make sure that you're fed, but we aren't as good at being with people. And I think that in rural spaces, we are sort of the example of that. Like we are good. We might not be able to fix your problems, and a
mm-hmm,
lot of us are fixers by nature,
mm-hmm,
but we will be with you. We will sit with you as you grieve. We will hold your hand. We will feed you because
mm-hmm,
that's what we do.
mm-hmm.
Um, and we will listen. And I think that that's one of the gifts that I have seen repeatedly in the work that I do in the community that I live in. Whether it's we're going to celebrate your new baby, or we're going to grieve a traumatic loss, that people are there to
Mm.
be with other people.
Ah, that the withness of it all. I think that's such an important thing. I think that's the what you want, and that I think that's such a rich reality of rural community, especially the investment of that. We're in this together, and it's you're not a product or somebody I can get something out of. You're someone to be in community with, and we're going to live our lives together for the time we're together. If it's that's for 10 minutes, or if that's for 10 years, or that's for 10 generations, and it's such this beautiful idea that that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. I think and the withness of it all. That if we're together, it's just scripture where two or three are gathered. I am with you, that sort of reality. That's so beautiful. And that's that reality that we have this expectation that people are there to solve each other's problems or to get something from one another. And if we can just say, a true community is a space that we are in where we expect no product or fixedness from each other, but we expect to be connected to one another. That's
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, let's move on into the last thing I always ask my guests is I want you to bring some sort of piece of media, whether that's a song or a book or a movie or podcast, TV show, whatever, that is giving you hope for rural life right now. So I'd love for you, so I'd love for you to share that with us.
So I haven't had a lot of time for a lot of media consumption because, I mean, you've heard I have 4 kids. And I'm also a full-time MSW student. I'm almost finished with that. So the last book that I read that really gave me, I think it was really a different perspective on rural life. There's a book called The Cooking Gene by Michael Twitty. I don't know if you know who he is, but
That book is on my pile of books to be read. I'm going to move it to the top now.
it is a fantastic book. I was blessed to be able to read it in a group with other folks through resourceful communities.
I love
Um,
resourceful communities.
so I read it with a kind of a group of other folks that they had funded. And it was really impactful in the ways that African cooking and African heritage and Southern heritage are so intertwined, because, again, it feeds into this idea of rural people are not necessarily who people originally envision, and how much of Southern especially rural Southern food, is connected to African tradition, and
Yes.
how that came to be. And it was just a really beautiful journey through his journey. So he talks about his own journey to connect to his roots
Oh,
through
that's
the
so
book and through
powerful.
food. It's
Oh,
really great.
that's beautiful. I think that's something. So that is The Cooking Gene by
Michael Twitty.
Michael Twitty. I'll put that in the show notes so if you want to look it up, and I'll try to I'll link it to a. So I try to encourage my listeners to utilize local independent bookstores if they can. I know many of our rural communities do have small bookstores that are trying to stay afloat. So even if you can, I'll put a link to one of my favorite local bookstores that you can order online, and they get a credit for it as
Yes.
part of that. So if one rural community can support another. So as we close out today, I want to thank you so much, Crystal, for being here. We've known each other for a few years. We've not maybe since 2015, maybe.
I think so.
I feel like the pandemic has added 15 years to all of our lives. So it's now we've known each other for 2 decades. It's what it feels like. So if people want to reach out to you, can they reach out to you through the NETworX website?
They can reach out to me through the NETworX website, or my email address is just crystal.imes@abccm.org.
Crystal.imes at abccm.org. And I will put that in the show notes as well. Anything else you'd like to tell our listeners, Crystal?
I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to talk with you and to share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here on Rusty Water Towers. You can listen to Rusty Water Towers wherever you get podcasts. If you have questions, suggestions for guests or topics, or just want to say hi, reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Or you can email us at rustywatertowers@gmail.com. Special thanks to my wife, Shannon Lemaster-Smith, for our theme music. I record and produce this podcast because of my hope that it lifts up the hope and faith in rural life. I record using Zoom Pro, edit in Adobe Audition, design our graphics in Canva and Photoshop, and distribute it via Anchor.fm. Find Rusty Water Towers wherever you get your podcasts, and if you can't find it there, let me know and I'll make sure it's there next time. Thanks and have a great day.
Live across the railroad tracks in a little lighthouse. Let you pass if you weren't trying to find me. Many of the trees are dead, there's stumps in the ground. In a great big yard across from the fire station. Oh,